I'm Marcus Thompson, 34, a blue-collar mechanic who barely scraped through high school. When the judge granted me full custody of my 8-year-old daughter Emma, my ex-wife Sarah literally laughed in the courthouse hallway. "Good luck, Marcus," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You can barely manage your own life, let alone raise a gifted child." Her words cut deep because, honestly, I believed them too. Sarah was the college graduate, the successful marketing executive, the one who'd always made me feel small and inadequate during our marriage. I was just the guy who fixed cars and struggled with paperwork, but Sarah had no idea what I was capable of when it came to my daughter. She didn't know about the late nights I'd spent researching learning techniques, the sacrifices I'd made to create a nurturing environment, or the quiet determination burning inside me to prove everyone wrong. 6 months later, when Emma's report card arrived, everything changed. The laughter stopped, and for the first time in years, I held all the cards. If you've ever been underestimated by those who should have believed in you most, this story is for you. I met Sarah at a coffee shop near the community college, where I was taking night classes, trying to get my associate degree in automotive technology. She was everything I wasn't: polished, articulate, confident. She wore tailored blazers and carried herself like she owned every room she entered. I was in my work clothes, grease still under my fingernails despite scrubbing them raw. "You're reading about engine diagnostics at a coffee shop?" She'd laughed, sliding into the seat across from me. "That's either really dedicated or really nerdy." I felt my cheeks burn. "Just trying to stay ahead of the curve." "I like that," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Sarah Martinez. And you are?" "Marcus Thompson. I'm a mechanic at Patterson's Auto." What followed was the most intense 6 months of my life. Sarah pursued me with the same determination she brought to everything else. She'd show up at the shop during my lunch breaks, drag me to art galleries and wine tastings, introduce me to her friends as her diamond in the rough. I should have seen the warning signs then. The way she'd fix my grammar in front of people, how she'd buy me clothes and insist I wear them instead of what I'd chosen, the subtle corrections that made me feel like I was constantly failing some test I didn't know I was taking, but I was 26 and had never felt wanted by someone like her. Sarah was magnetic, successful, going places. She made me believe I could be more than just a guy who fixed cars. We got married 2 years later, in a ceremony that felt more like her show than our wedding. I stood there in my rented tux, watching her work the room like a politician, and wondered if I'd ever be enough for her. The wedding photo still sits in a box somewhere in my closet. We look happy, Sarah radiant in her designer dress, me awkward but grinning beside her. I keep it not because I miss her, but because I want to remember the man who believed he wasn't worth loving unless someone else decided he was. For the first few years, I convinced myself we were building something together. Sarah climbed the corporate ladder while I worked extra hours to contribute to our lifestyle. She'd come home talking about client presentations and marketing strategies, and I'd listen, trying to understand her world while she showed little interest in mine. When Emma was born, I thought everything would change. I held my daughter for the first time and felt something I'd never experienced: pure, unconditional love. She was perfect, this tiny person who didn't care about my education or my job title. She just needed me. "She has your eyes," Sarah said, from her hospital bed, but there was something distant in her voice, like she was already planning how to mold Emma into her vision of success. I threw myself into fatherhood with the same intensity I brought to everything else. I read every parenting book I could find, learned to change diapers faster than a pit crew, and spent hours just talking to Emma about everything and nothing. Sarah returned to work after 3 months, leaving me to handle the morning routine. Before heading to the shop, that's when the criticism really started. "You're putting her diaper on wrong. She doesn't need a bottle every time she cries." "Marcus, you can't solve everything with patience. Sometimes children need discipline." Every interaction became a lesson in my inadequacy. I was too soft, too permissive, too emotional. Real parents, successful parents, had structure, expectations, standards. I was raising Emma to be weak, dependent, ordinary. The worst part was how Sarah could make her criticism sound like love. "I'm only trying to help you be the best father you can be," she'd say after correcting me in front of Emma. "You want what's best for her, don't you?" So I started second-guessing everything. Was I reading to her too much? Not enough. Should I be pushing her toward activities Sarah approved of instead of letting her play with blocks for hours? When Emma cried, I'd find myself frozen, wondering if comforting her was the right response, or just another sign of my weakness. By the time Emma turned 5, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Sarah had systems for everything: meal plans, educational schedules, approved playmates. I followed her rules and watched my daughter become quieter, more anxious, desperate to please a mother who always found something to improve. "She's not reaching her potential," Sarah would say during our monthly family meetings. "We need to be more intentional about her development." I wanted to scream that Emma was 6 years old, that she deserved to be a kid, but I'd learned that disagreeing with Sarah meant being labeled emotional, unrealistic, or her favorite, unsupportive of our daughter's future. The final blow came when I suggested we let Emma quit piano lessons. She'd been crying every practice session, begging not to go to class. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Sarah said, her voice ice. "You want to let her quit the moment things get difficult. That's not how you raise successful children, Marcus. That's how you raise quitters." "She's 7, I said quietly. "Maybe she'd be happier doing something else." "Happy?" Sarah laughed, and it was the same laugh I'd hear in the courthouse years later. "Marcus, happiness doesn't get you into Harvard. Excellence does. And if you can't understand that, maybe you shouldn't be making decisions about her future." That night, I sat in Emma's room watching her sleep. This beautiful little girl who carried the weight of expectations she couldn't possibly understand. I made a promise to her in that moment, though I didn't know how I'd keep it. Someday, I told her sleeping form, you'll know that you're enough exactly as you are. Someday, someone will love you for who you are, not who they think you should become. I just never imagined that someone would have to be me alone. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a man in a cheap suit who looked as uncomfortable as I felt. Sarah had filed for divorce and full custody of Emma, citing my inability to provide the stable, academically environment a gifted child requires. I stood in my kitchen, still in my work clothes from the night shift, reading words that felt like they were written in a foreign language. Irreconcilable differences. Sole physical custody. Supervised visitation. Pending psychological evaluation. The legal terminology made my head spin, but the message was clear. Sarah wanted me out of Emma's life. My first instinct was to call her, to ask if we could work this out without lawyers and courts and strangers making decisions about our daughter. But when I dialed her number, I got her voicemail, the professional one she used for work calls. "You've reached Sarah Martinez at Pinnacle Marketing. I'm either with a client or strategizing your next campaign. Leave a message and I'll get back to you within 24 hours. I hung up without speaking. Even in divorce, she was marketing herself. The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of paperwork and panic. I'd never needed a lawyer before, never imagined I'd be sitting in offices that smelled like leather and desperation, trying to explain why I deserved to be in my daughter's life. The first 3 attorneys I met with were polite but clear. Custody cases were expensive, complex, and given Sarah's education and income, my chances weren't good. One actually suggested I consider agreeing to supervised visitation and weekend custody. "Be realistic about your resources, Mr. Thompson." I was walking out of that lawyer's office feeling like I'd been punched in the gut when I literally ran into someone coming around the corner, papers scattered everywhere, and I found myself face to face with a woman about my age. Short and sturdy, wearing a rumpled suit, and carrying a briefcase held together with duct tape. Sorry, she said, scrambling to collect her files. I was running late for a client meeting, and she stopped, looking at me more closely. "You okay? You look like someone just told you your dog died." "Worse," I said, helping her gather the papers. "My ex-wife wants to take my daughter away, and apparently I can't afford to fight it." She paused, studying me with sharp brown eyes. "Margaret Chen," she said, extending her hand, "and you'd be surprised what we can afford when we're fighting for what matters." That's how I found myself sitting in Margaret's office an hour later, in a building that had seen better decades, drinking coffee that tasted like it had been made sometime last week. Her business card was simple, printed on basic cards. "Margaret Chen, family law, fighting for families, not fees." "Look, Marcus," she said, after I'd told her my story, "I'm not going to lie to you. This isn't going to be easy. Your ex-wife has advantages: education, income, social connections, but I've seen plenty of cases where the parent with the better resume isn't the better parent, so you'll take my case." She leaned back in her chair, which squeaked ominously. "I'll take your case if you're willing to fight for it. Not just show up and hope for the best, but really fight. Document everything. Follow every rule. Be the parent Emma needs, not the one your ex-wife says you can't be." "What's that going to cost me? More than you want to spend? Less than you think you can afford?" she said. "But we can work out a payment plan. The question is, how much is your daughter worth to you?" "Everything," I thought. "She's worth everything." Margaret outlined the process: mediation first, then hearings, character, witnesses, home studies. Sarah would try to paint me as unstable, irresponsible, inadequate. I'd need to prove otherwise. "The good news," Margaret said, "is that courts generally favor keeping both parents involved. The bad news is that your ex-wife is clearly planning to argue that you're not capable of providing what Emma needs." That night, I sat in Emma's room while she slept, looking at the custody papers again. Sarah's petition listed everything she saw as my failings: my lack of college education, my blue-collar job, my inability to provide intellectual stimulation appropriate for a gifted child. She'd even included Emma's recent struggles in school as evidence of my inadequate parenting during our separation. But as I watched Emma sleep, I realized something that Sarah had never understood. This wasn't about test scores or college prep or creating the perfect resume. This was about a little girl who needed someone to love her unconditionally, someone who would listen to her dreams and fears, someone who would be there when she needed comfort. I thought about all the bedtime stories I'd read, all the scraped knees I'd bandaged, All the times Emma had crawled into my lap when she was scared or sad. Those moments hadn't required a degree or a corner office. They'd just required love. The next morning, I called Margaret and told her I was ready to fight. Good, she said, because your ex-wife just filed a motion for temporary custody. She wants Emma moved to her house immediately, pending the final hearing. My heart sank. Can she do that? She can try. But Marcus, this is where the real battle begins. Are you ready? I looked at Emma's school photos on my refrigerator, her gap-toothed smile, her eyes bright with trust and love. Sarah might have the advantages, but I had something she'd never understood. I knew who Emma really was, not who she wanted her to become. I'm ready, I said. But even as I said it, I wondered if being ready would be enough. The judgment started immediately. Not just from Sarah, but from everyone who thought they knew what was best for Emma. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, called me in for a conference 3 days after the divorce papers were filed. She sat across from me in her classroom, surrounded by colorful posters about reading and math, her expression carefully neutral. Mr. Thompson, I'm concerned about Emma's recent performance, she said, sliding a folder across the table. Her grades have dropped, she's been distracted in class, and yesterday she had a meltdown during math time. I opened the folder to see Emma's work from the past month. Her usually neat handwriting was messy, her math problems half-finished, her reading comprehension worksheets marked with red ink. My heart clenched, seeing the evidence of my daughter's pains spelled out in missing assignments and incomplete thoughts. She's going through a lot right now, I said. The divorce, the custody situation, of course, Mrs. Rodriguez interrupted gently. And I understand that you're both trying to do what's best for Emma. But Mr. Thompson, I have to ask, are you prepared for the challenges of single parenting? Emma is a bright child, but she needs consistency, structure, academic support. The unspoken message was clear. Do you really think you can handle this? It was the same question I heard from my neighbor Mrs. Patterson when I picked up Emma from her house after work. That poor little girl, she'd said, shaking her head. I hope you know what you're doing, Marcus. Raising a child alone isn't easy, especially for a father. My own mother wasn't much better. When I called to tell her about the custody battle, there was a long pause before she spoke. Marcus, honey, maybe you should think about what's really best for Emma. Sarah has resources, education, opportunities you can't provide. Maybe shared custody would be better for everyone. Thanks for the support, Mom, I said, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. I'm just being realistic, she said. You're a good father, but Emma needs more than you can give her right now. Even my coworkers at the shop had opinions. Jimmy, who'd been there since I was an apprentice, pulled me aside one afternoon when I was having trouble concentrating on a transmission rebuild. Look, Marcus, I know you love that little girl, but be honest with yourself. What kind of life can you give her? Sarah's got the nice house, the good schools, the college connections. Sometimes, love ain't enough. By the time Emma's court-appointed counselor wanted to meet with me, I felt like I was drowning in other people's expectations of my failure. Dr. Patricia Williams was a kind woman with gentle eyes, but even she seemed skeptical as she reviewed Emma's file. Emma's been through significant trauma with the divorce, she said. She's exhibiting signs of anxiety, some regression in her academic performance, difficulty with emotional regulation. The question is, what environment will best support her? Healing and development. I wanted to scream that Emma had been struggling long before the divorce, that Sarah's pressure and perfectionism had been breaking our daughter for years. But I also knew that Emma's current problems would be seen as evidence of my inadequacy. What does Emma say she wants? I asked. Dr. Williams consulted her notes. She expresses love for both parents, but seems confused about the situation. She's mentioned feeling like she needs to be perfect to make everyone happy. That's concerning. That night, I sat with Emma while she picked at her dinner mac and cheese from a box. Not the organic balanced meals Sarah always prepared. Daddy, am I in trouble? She asked quietly. No, sweetheart. Why would you think that? Because everyone keeps asking me questions about you and Mommy, and I don't know the right answers. My heart broke a little more. There aren't right or wrong answers, just honest ones. But what if I say something wrong and you go away? I knelt beside her chair, taking her small hands in mine. Emma, listen to me. No matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, I will always love you. You are not responsible for adult problems, okay? She nodded, but I could see the worry still clouding her eyes. That weekend, Sarah exercised her visitation rights, picking Emma up for their scheduled time together. I watched from the window as Emma climbed into Sarah's pristine SUV, her overnight bag looking shabby next to Sarah's leather interior. When Emma came home Sunday evening, she was quiet, withdrawn. It took an hour of gentle coaxing before she finally told me what had happened. Mommy said I need to tell the truth about how things really are here, Emma said, not meeting my eyes. She said I should tell Dr. Williams if I'm not happy, or if I'm not learning enough, or if I'm scared. Are you scared? I asked. I'm scared that if I tell the truth, someone will decide I have to live somewhere I don't want to live. I realized then what Sarah was doing. She was coaching Emma, preparing her to testify about my inadequacies. My ex-wife was using our daughter as a weapon in her campaign to prove I wasn't fit to be a father. The next morning, I called Margaret. She's manipulating Emma, I said, trying to get her to say things that will help her case. I figured she might, Margaret said grimly. It's more common than you'd think. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What can I do? You can be the parent Emma needs. You can provide stability, love, and support. And you can trust that the truth will come out eventually. But what if it doesn't? What if everyone's right and I'm not enough? There was a pause before Margaret spoke. Marcus, let me ask you something. When Emma's scared, who does she come to? When she's hurt, who does she want to comfort her? When she's excited about something, who does she want to share it with? I thought about bedtime stories and midnight nightmares. Scraped knees and proud moments. Me, I said quietly. Exactly. Don't let other people's doubts become your own. Emma knows who loves her. The question is, do you trust that love enough to fight for it? As I hung up the phone, I made a decision. I couldn't control what other people thought about my chances, but I could control how I showed up for Emma. I could be the father she deserved, even if the whole world was betting against me. The real test was just beginning. The courthouse felt like a cathedral of judgment, all marble columns and echoing footsteps. I sat beside Margaret in the gallery, watching Sarah confer with her team of lawyers in their expensive suits. She looked confident, prepared, like she was about to close a business deal rather than fight for custody of our daughter. Judge Patricia Hendricks was a stern woman in her 50s, with graying hair and eyes that seemed to see through everything. She'd reviewed all the documents, interviewed Emma privately, and spoken with the court counselor. Now came the moment of truth. This custody case presents some interesting considerations. Judge Hendricks began, her voice carrying across the courtroom. Both parties clearly love the child and want what's best for her. However, the question before this court is not who loves Emma more, but what arrangement will best serve her interests. My palms were sweating. Sarah sat straight in her chair, practically radiating confidence. Her lead attorney had spent an hour detailing my shortcomings, my lack of higher education, my modest income, my inability to provide the enriching environment a gifted child required. Mrs. Martinez, the judge continued, you've presented a compelling case for your capabilities as a parent. Your education, your professional success, your financial stability, these are all assets. Sarah's lips curved into a slight smile. I felt my heart sink. However, Judge Hendricks said, and that single word changed everything. This court is also concerned about the pressure and expectations you've placed on Emma. The child's counselor has noted signs of anxiety and perfectionism that suggests an environment focused more on achievement than emotional well-being. Sarah's smile faltered. Mr. Thompson, the judge turned to me. While you may lack some traditional markers of success, the evidence shows something else entirely. Emma's counselor reports that she consistently seeks comfort from you, that she expresses feeling safe in your presence, and that her relationship with you appears to be built on unconditional love rather than conditional achievement. I could barely breathe. Furthermore, Judge Hendricks continued, Emma herself, when interviewed privately, expressed a clear preference for living with her father. She stated, and I quote, Daddy loves me, even when I'm not perfect. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of my heart hammering against my ribs. Therefore, this court grants primary physical custody to Mr. Marcus Thompson, with visitation rights for Mrs. Martinez every other weekend and Wednesday evenings, subject to review in 6 months. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder. Sat stunned, unable to process what had just happened. Margaret was shaking my hand, talking about next steps and logistics, but her voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Your Honor, I'd like to request an immediate appeal. This decision is clearly not in Emma's best interests. Mrs. Martinez, Judge Hendricks interrupted, you have the right to appeal, but this ruling stands pending any future proceedings. Mr. Thompson, you may arrange to have Emma's belongings transferred to your residence. As we filed out of the courtroom, Sarah caught up with me in the hallway. Her composed mask had slipped, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. This is a mistake, Marcus, she said, her voice low and intense. You have no idea what you're doing. Emma needs structure, challenge, preparation for her future. You're going to ruin her. I'm going to love her, I said simply. Sarah's laugh was sharp, bitter. Good luck, Marcus. You can barely manage your own life, let alone raise a gifted child. When you fail, and you will fail, don't come crying to me. She walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor with military precision. I watched her go, feeling a mixture of triumph and terror. Margaret appeared at my elbow. How does it feel to be a full-time single dad? She asked. Terrifying, I admitted. What if she's right? What if I mess this up? Then you'll figure it out, Margaret said. That's what parents do. They figure it out. That afternoon, I drove to Sarah's house to pick up Emma's things. The house felt different, now sterile, like a museum exhibit of perfect family life. Emma's room was immaculate, every toy in its place, her clothes arranged by color and season. Emma sat on her bed, watching me pack her stuffed animals into boxes. Daddy, are you sure this is okay? What do you mean, sweetheart? Mommy said the judge made a mistake. She said I need to be with her to be successful. I stopped packing and sat beside her on the bed. Emma, what does being successful mean to you? She thought for a moment. Getting good grades? Going to college? Having a job like Mommy? Those are all good things, I said. But being successful also means being happy, being kind, being true to yourself. It means knowing that you're loved no matter what. Will you love me if I get bad grades? I'll love you no matter what grades you get. What if I don't want to go to college? I'll love you no matter what you choose to do with your life. What if I mess up really bad? Then we'll figure out how to fix it together. That's what families do. Emma wrapped her arms around my neck. I want to live with you. Daddy, good, I said, hugging her tight. Because I want you to live with me too. As we loaded her belongings into my beat-up Honda, I felt the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. I had won the battle, but the war was just beginning. Now I had to prove that love really was enough. That a mechanic from a small town could raise a gifted daughter who would thrive. Emma climbed into the passenger seat, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. Daddy, what happens now? Now we go home, I said, starting the engine, and we figure out how to be a family. In the rearview mirror, I saw Sarah watching from her front window, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. She had expected to win, had been certain that success and status would triumph over simple love. She had no idea what was coming next. My apartment had never felt smaller than it did that first morning with Emma as my full-time responsibility. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen that opened into a living room where my second-hand furniture looked even shabbier in the morning light. Emma stood in the doorway, holding her stuffed elephant, looking around with eyes that seemed to be cataloging every difference between this place and her mother's house. It's not very big, she said quietly. No, I agreed, but it's ours. Come on, let me show you what I did with your room. I'd spent the previous weekend transforming the spare bedroom into Emma's space. I couldn't afford new furniture, but I'd painted the walls a soft lavender, her favorite color, and hung up the artwork she'd made over the years. Her bed was a twin from a garage sale, but I'd covered it with a quilt my grandmother had made, and arranged her stuffed animals carefully on the pillows. I set up a desk for homework, I said, pointing to the small table I'd refinished. And there's space for all your books on these shelves. Emma walked around the room slowly, touching her belongings like she was reacquainting herself with them. Where's my computer? Your computer. For my educational programs. Mommy said I need to work on them every day. I felt a stab of inadequacy. Sarah's house had been equipped with tablets, educational software, learning games. We don't have a computer right now, but we can use the library, and I can see about getting one later. Emma nodded, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. This was so different from what she was used to. The first week was a series of small disasters and minor victories. I burned the pancakes on Tuesday morning, making us both late for school and work. Wednesday, I forgot to pack Emma's lunch and had to drive to the school to bring her money for the cafeteria. Thursday, I couldn't help her with her math homework because I didn't understand the new methods they were teaching. Mommy showed me how to do this, Emma said, staring at the worksheet with tears threatening to spill over. Then you show me, I said, sitting beside her at the kitchen table. You can be the teacher. It was a small moment, but I watched Emma's posture change as she explained the process to me. Her voice grew stronger, more confident. She wasn't just completing homework, she was teaching, sharing knowledge, being valued for what she knew. You're a good teacher, I told her when we finished. You explained that better than I bet your regular teacher does. Emma smiled. First genuine smile I'd seen since she'd moved in. Bedtime routines were another challenge. Sarah had always been strict about schedules: bath at 7, teeth brushed, lights out by 8, but Emma seemed wound tight, anxious about something. Daddy, did I do good today? She asked as I tucked her in. You did great. Why? I forgot to practice piano, and I didn't finish my reading log, and I think I got a problem wrong on my math test. I sat on the edge of her bed, seeing the worry lines on her 8-year-old face. Emma, did you try your best? Yes. Did you learn something new? I learned about butterflies in science class. Did you help someone, or say something kind? I helped Riley tie her shoes at recess. Then you had a good day. The rest is just details. But Mommy says, hey, I said gently. What Mommy says is important when you're with Mommy, but when you're with me, we have different rules. My rules are, try your best, be kind, and know that I love you no matter what. Emma was quiet for a moment. Even if I'm not the smartest kid in class, even then. Even if I don't want to be a doctor or a lawyer or something important, even then. Even if I just want to play sometimes instead of studying, especially then. She curled up with her elephant, and for the first time since moving in, she didn't lie awake worrying. The contrast with Sarah's house became obvious during Emma's first weekend visit with her mother. She came back Sunday evening, quiet and tense, carrying a stack of workbooks and a schedule for the week. Mommy bought me new educational games, Emma said, showing me the materials. She says I'm behind where I should be for my age. I looked at the schedule Sarah had sent home every hour from after school until bedtime was accounted for. Reading comprehension, math drills, piano practice, educational computer games. There was no time for just being a kid. Emma, do you like these games? She shrugged. They're okay. Mommy says they'll help me get into good schools. What would you like to do after school? I don't know. Maybe draw, or play outside. I made a decision that would define our relationship going forward. How about we try something different? You do your homework first, and then you can choose what you want to do with your free time. Really. And on weekends after any homework is done, we'll have fun time. Movies, parks, whatever you want. Emma's face lit up. Can we go to the library? I like the children's section. Of course. That Saturday, we spent 3 hours at the library. Emma didn't head for the educational materials or the advanced reading section. Instead, she found a corner in the children's area and pulled out book after book of stories, fairy tales, adventure stories, silly picture books that made her giggle. These are baby books, she said, but she was smiling as she read. If you enjoy them, they're perfect books, I said. I watched her relax in a way I hadn't seen in years. She sprawled on the carpet, completely absorbed in stories about talking animals and magical kingdoms. When I asked if she was ready to go, she looked up with shining eyes. Can we come back next week? We can come back whenever you want. Walking home, Emma slipped her hand into mine. Daddy, is it okay if I'm not perfect? Emma, you're perfect exactly as you are. But what if I don't make good grades? Then we'll figure out how to help you learn better. What if I'm not as smart as Mommy thinks I am? Then we'll love the smart you are. What if I disappoint you? I stopped walking and knelt down to her level. Emma, listen to me. You could never disappoint me. You're my daughter, and I love you exactly as you are right now, and I'll love you no matter who you become. She threw her arms around my neck, and I felt something shift between us. We were building something new here, something that had nothing to do with achievement or success or meeting other people's expectations. We were building a family based on love, acceptance, and the radical idea that Emma was already enough. As we walked up the stairs to our small apartment, I realized that maybe having less stuff didn't mean having less value. Maybe the simplicity of our life together was exactly what Emma needed to figure out who she really was. The real work was just beginning. It was a rainy Thursday evening when I discovered what Emma had been hiding. She was supposed to be doing homework at the kitchen table, but I'd noticed her scribbling in a notebook that wasn't from school. When I asked about it, she quickly closed it and stuffed it into her backpack. Just drawing, she said, not meeting my eyes. Something in her tone made me curious, but I didn't push. Emma had learned to be secretive about her interests, and I was still working to rebuild the trust that had been damaged by years of having her passions dismissed or redirected. 3 days later, I was putting away her laundry when I found the notebooks, not just one, but 4 of them, hidden under her mattress like contraband. My first instinct was to respect her privacy, but one had fallen open, and the page that stared back at me made me gasp. It was a story, written in Emma's careful handwriting, about a girl who could talk to animals. But it wasn't just any story. It was sophisticated, nuanced, with dialogue that sounded real, and descriptions that painted vivid pictures in my mind. The characters had depth, the plot had twists, and the writing showed an understanding of human nature that seemed far beyond her 8 years. I sat on her bed, reading page after page of stories Emma had written in secret. There were fantasy tales about magical kingdoms, mystery stories about kids solving crimes, science fiction adventures set on distant planets. Each story was more impressive than the last, showing not just creativity but technical skill that took my breath away. But it was the 4th notebook that really stunned me. This one was filled with what looked like mathematical equations and geometric drawings. Emma had been working out complex problems, creating patterns and formulas that I recognized from my community college courses. She'd been teaching herself advanced math, working through concepts that wouldn't normally be introduced until high school. Emma, I called, and she appeared in the doorway, her face flushing when she saw the notebooks in my hands. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I know I should be focusing on my regular homework, but Emma, stop. I held up one of the stories. Did you write this? She nodded, looking miserable. I know it's not educational. Mommy says creative? Writing is a waste of time unless it's for English class. Emma, this is incredible. How long have you been writing stories? Since I was little. I used to write them and show them to you. Remember? Before the divorce? When you'd read them and say they were good? I did remember. Emma had always been creating stories, but somewhere along the way, I'd let Sarah convince me that we needed to focus on more practical skills. I'd stopped encouraging Emma's creativity, thinking I was helping her succeed. And this math. I showed her the notebook full of equations. I found some books at the library. I like figuring out how numbers work together, especially in patterns. It's like solving puzzles. I stared at my daughter, seeing her clearly for the first time in years. Emma, why were you hiding these? Because they're not important. Mommy says I need to focus on getting good grades in regular subjects, not waste time on things that won't help me get into college. My heart broke a little. Here was my daughter, hiding her extraordinary gifts because she'd been taught that they didn't matter, that they were somehow less valuable than the approved activities on Sarah's schedule. Emma, can I tell you something? This writing is better than anything I've ever seen from someone your age. And this math, these are concepts that most kids don't learn until they're teenagers. Really, really? In fact, I think you might be working at a level that's way beyond what they're teaching you in school. Emma's eyes widened. Is that bad? No, sweetheart, it's amazing. It means you have gifts that we need to nurture, not hide. That night, after Emma went to bed, I sat at my kitchen table reading every story she'd written, working through every math problem she'd solved. I was looking at the work of a child who wasn't just smart, she was brilliant, creative, and completely different from what Sarah had been trying to mold her into. I thought about all the piano lessons Emma had endured, all the educational software she'd been forced to use, all the structured activities that had been imposed on her. Meanwhile, she'd been developing real talents in secret, afraid to show them because they didn't fit the approved plan. The next morning, I called Mrs. Rodriguez, Emma's teacher. I need to show you something, I said. Can we meet after school? That afternoon, I brought Emma's notebooks to the classroom. Mrs. Rodriguez read through them with growing amazement. Mr. Thompson, I had no idea Emma was capable of this level of work. Her performance in class has been so inconsistent that I was actually concerned about her abilities. What do you mean? She seems bored during lessons, distracted during assignments. Her test scores are average at best. I was beginning to wonder if she might need remedial support. I felt a flash of anger not at Mrs. Rodriguez, but at the system that had failed to see what Emma was really capable of. What if the problem isn't that she needs help, but that she's not being challenged? Mrs. Rodriguez looked at the notebooks. Again, you may be right. This writing shows advanced vocabulary, complex sentence structure, sophisticated plot development. In this math, Mr. Thompson, she's doing algebra. We haven't even introduced basic geometry yet, so what do? I'd like to have Emma tested. There are assessments we can do to determine her actual academic level. If she's working as far ahead as these notebooks suggest, we might need to consider different options. That evening, I sat with Emma at the kitchen table, her notebooks spread out between us. Double quotes, Emma, I talked to Mrs. Rodriguez today. She was very impressed with your writing and your math work. Emma looked surprised. She wants to have you take some tests to see what level you're really working at. Would that be okay? What kind of tests? Tests to see how smart you really are. Not the kind that grade you on memorizing facts, but the kind that let you show how you think and solve problems. Emma was quiet for a moment. What if I don't do well? Then we'll know what you need help with. But Emma, I have a feeling you're going to do better than anyone expects. Even better than Mommy thinks I can do. Maybe especially better than Mommy thinks you can do. That night, Emma didn't hide her notebooks. She left them on the kitchen table, and I found her writing in one of them after I got home from work. She looked up when I walked in, and for the first time in months, she didn't quickly close the notebook or try to hide what she was doing. I'm writing a story about a dad and daughter who go on adventures, she said. Want to hear it? I sat beside her, and she read me. A story about a father who discovers his daughter has magical powers that everyone else thinks are just imagination. The father believes in her gifts and helps her learn to use them, even when everyone else says magic isn't real. That's a beautiful story, I said when she finished. I especially like the father in it. Emma smiled. He's the best character. He sees things that other people miss. As I listened to my daughter read her story, I realized she'd been trying to tell me something all along. Hidden in her notebooks were not just stories and equations, but a plea to be seen for who she really was, not the child Sarah wanted her to be, but the brilliant, creative, unique person she actually was. For the first time since the custody battle began, I felt like I understood what I was fighting for. It wasn't just about proving I could be a good father. It was about giving Emma the space to become whoever she was meant to be, without apology or compromise. The real Emma was finally ready to step out of hiding. The library became my second home. Every evening after work, while Emma did her homework or wrote in her notebooks, I sat at one of the worn wooden tables surrounded by stacks of books about gifted children, alternative learning methods, and educational psychology. I'd never been much of a reader beyond automotive manuals and the occasional paperback thriller, but desperation made me a scholar. I devoured everything I could find about how bright kids really learned, how to nurture creativity, how to support a child whose mind worked faster and differently than their peers. The librarian, a kind woman named Mrs. Patterson, noticed my nightly ritual and started setting aside books she thought might help. New parent? She asked one evening, noting the pile of parenting books on my table. Learning to be a better one, I said. She recommended websites, forums, research studies. I learned about concepts I'd never heard, of asynchronous development, where a child might be advanced in some areas while being age-appropriate in others. Perfectionism, and how it could actually hinder a gifted child's progress, the importance of emotional support over academic acceleration. One book in particular changed everything, The Gifted Child's Bill of Rights. As I read through the list of what gifted children deserve: the right to know about their giftedness, the right to learn something new every day, the right to be passionate about their talent, as I realized how many of these rights Emma had been denied. She had the right to not know or do everything, the right to be illogical and imperfect, the right to be respected for her individuality. Sarah's approach had violated almost every principle of healthy gifted education. I started taking notes, filling a composition book with strategies and insights. Emma noticed the books I was bringing home. "Are you studying too, Daddy?" "I'm learning." "How to help you learn?" I said. "Turns out, there's a lot I don't know about how smart kids' brains work." "What did you find out?" I showed her the book I was reading. "That every kid is different, even smart kids. Some kids learn by reading, some by doing, some by talking through ideas. I'm trying to figure out what works best for you." Emma sat beside me, looking at the chapter titles. "Can I read some of it?" We started reading together, Emma asking questions about the concepts, me trying to understand how they applied to her. It became our evening routine: homework first, then research time, where we explored how her mind worked. "This says that some gifted kids are also really sensitive to things, like loud noises or bright lights," Emma said one night. "That's me. The fluorescent lights at school make my head hurt. Why didn't you tell me? I thought everyone felt that way." Mommy said I was being dramatic when I complained. I made a note to talk to her teacher about seating arrangements. Every small discovery felt like a victory, another piece of the puzzle that would help Emma thrive. My online research led me to forums, where parents of gifted children shared their experiences. I read stories that sounded just like Emma's: bright kids who seemed to underperform in traditional classrooms, children whose creativity was seen as distraction, families struggling with the disconnect between a child's potential and their daily reality. I started posting questions, sharing Emma's story, asking for advice. The responses were overwhelming: parents from all over the country offering support, sharing resources, validating what I was beginning to understand about Emma's needs. One message particularly stuck with me, from a single mother in Oregon: "Trust your instincts. You know your daughter better than any test or expert if you see gifts in her, nurture them. The world will try to make her conform, but your job is to help her soar." I printed that message and taped it to my bathroom mirror. The research also taught me about the social and emotional challenges gifted children faced. Many struggled with perfectionism, anxiety about meeting expectations, difficulty relating to peers who didn't share their interests or intensity. Emma's recent struggles suddenly made perfect sense. I learned about something called imposter syndrome, where capable people convinced themselves they weren't really smart, that their successes were just luck. Emma had been living with this for years, taught to doubt her own abilities because they didn't match what others expected from her. Armed with this knowledge, I started making changes to our daily routine. Instead of pushing Emma to complete all her homework perfectly, I encouraged her to take breaks when she felt frustrated. Instead of insisting she finish everything, I helped her prioritize what was truly important. "Your teacher wants you to do 20 math problems, but you already understand the concept after 5, I told her one evening. "What if we do 10 really well instead of 20 that make you miserable? Is that allowed?" "I'll talk to Mrs. Rodriguez. Sometimes smart kids need different expectations." I also started incorporating Emma's interests into her learning. When she was struggling with a history unit about ancient civilizations, I suggested she read a story set in ancient Egypt. When she was bored with her science homework about plants, we started a small garden on our apartment balcony so she could observe growth cycles firsthand. "Learning doesn't have to be painful," I told her. "It should be exciting." Emma's response to these changes was immediate. She became more engaged, more curious, more willing to take intellectual risks. Her confidence grew as she realized that her mind wasn't weird or wrong, it was just different, and different was valuable. The most important thing I learned was that gifted children needed advocates, people who understood their unique needs and were willing to fight for them. Sarah had seen Emma's giftedness as something to be managed and directed. I was beginning to see it as something to be celebrated and nurtured. 3 weeks into my research project, Emma brought me a new story. She'd written a science fiction tale about a planet where everyone had to think exactly the same way, and one girl who thought differently saved everyone. "It's about being different," she explained. "How sometimes the thing that makes you weird is the thing that makes you special." As I read her story, I realized she was teaching me as much as I was learning about her. Emma understood things about creativity, individuality, and courage that I was still figuring out. "You're pretty smart, you know that," I told her. "I'm starting to remember," she said with a smile. The research was working. Now I just had to figure out how to put it all into practice. Sarah's first attempt at sabotage came through Emma's backpack. I was helping Emma with homework when I found a folder I'd never seen before, filled with printouts about educational deficiencies in single-parent households and the importance of structured learning environments for gifted children. "Where did this come from?" I asked Emma. She looked uncomfortable. "Mommy gave it to me. She said I should show it to you so you'd understand what I need to succeed." I flipped through the articles, all carefully highlighted to emphasize points about how children of divorce suffered academically, how fathers were less equipped to handle educational decisions, how gifted children required specialized resources that single parents couldn't provide. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Thought you might find those articles helpful. Emma's future depends on making informed decisions about her education." That was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Sarah launched a campaign designed to undermine every positive change Emma and I had made. She sent Emma home from visits, with elaborate study schedules that contradicted everything I'd learned about gifted children's needs. She enrolled Emma in additional tutoring programs without consulting me, then criticized me when Emma was too exhausted to participate. Emma tells me you're letting her skip homework problems, Sarah said during one of our awkward custody exchanges. I hope you realize that's setting her up for failure. She already understands the material, I explained. Her teacher and I agreed. Her teacher doesn't know Emma like I do, Sarah interrupted. You're coddling her, Marcus. The real world doesn't care about her feelings. Emma stood between us, clutching her backpack, her face carefully blank. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she'd learned to disappear when her parents thought about her future. The worst part was how Sarah used Emma as a messenger for her criticisms. Emma would come home with detailed reports about what she was supposed to be doing, what educational opportunities she was missing, what other children her age were accomplishing. Mommy showed me this website about kids who got into Harvard when they were 12, Emma said one evening, her voice small. She said I could do that too if I worked harder. Do you want to go to Harvard when you're 12? Emma shrugged. I don't even know what Harvard is. I knelt down to her level. Emma, what do you want to do with your life? I want to write stories. And maybe figure out how math works in nature, like the patterns in flowers and shells. Those are wonderful goals. But Mommy says they're not practical. Sarah's interference escalated when she discovered I'd been researching gifted education. She accused me of playing amateur psychologist and insisted that Emma needed real professional evaluation from specialists she'd selected. I've scheduled appointments with Dr. Richardson at the Gifted Academy, she texted me. Emma needs proper assessment, not whatever Google University has taught you. When I looked up Dr. Richardson, I discovered he was known for aggressive academic acceleration and strict behavioral protocols, everything my research had warned against for emotionally sensitive gifted children. I don't want to go, Emma told me when I explained about the appointment. The last time Mommy took me to a doctor like that, he said I wasn't trying hard enough. I called Margaret, my lawyer, to ask about my rights regarding Emma's medical and educational decisions. Legally you have equal say in major decisions, Margaret explained. But Sarah can make the argument that she's only trying to help Emma reach her potential. What if her idea of help is actually harmful? Then you document everything and prepare to prove it if necessary. I started keeping detailed records of Emma's moods and behaviors after visits with Sarah. The pattern was clear. Emma would return home anxious, self-critical, and withdrawn. It would take days of patience and reassurance to restore her confidence. The breakthrough came when Emma herself started pushing back against Sarah's pressure. During one visit, Sarah had apparently criticized Emma's latest story for being unrealistic and suggested she write something more educational instead. I told Mommy that Daddy says my stories are important, Emma reported when she came home. She said Daddy doesn't understand what's best for smart children. What did you say to that? I said maybe being smart isn't just about test scores. I felt a surge of pride. Emma was learning to trust her own judgment, to value her unique gifts even when others dismissed them. Sarah's response was swift and angry. She sent me a series of texts that revealed just how desperate she was becoming. You're filling Emma's head with nonsense about creativity being more important than achievement. She needs structure and high expectations, not permission to be mediocre. When she fails to reach her potential, remember that you chose feelings over her future. I screenshot every message, building a file of evidence that showed Sarah's increasingly erratic behavior. The final straw came when Sarah tried to convince Emma that I was holding her back academically. Emma came home from a visit in tears, carrying a stack of advanced workbooks Sarah had purchased. Mommy says if I lived with her, I could be in accelerated programs. Emma sobbed. She says, you don't understand how smart I really am. I held my daughter while she cried, feeling rage build in my chest. Sarah was using Emma's own intelligence as a weapon against our relationship, trying to convince her that love and acceptance were somehow obstacles to success. Emma, look at me, I said when her tears subsided. Do you feel smart when you're with me? Yes. Do you feel loved? Yes. Do you feel like you can be yourself? Yes. Then you're getting everything you need to grow into whoever you're meant to be. That night, I made a decision. I called Mrs. Rodriguez and asked for a meeting with the school's gifted education coordinator. If Sarah wanted to fight about Emma's educational needs, I would make sure I had professional support from my reproach. I also started documenting Emma's creative output and academic progress under my care. Her stories were getting longer and more sophisticated. Her math work showed genuine understanding, not just memorization. Most importantly, she was happy, curious, confident, and eager to learn. That Sarah could try to undermine our relationship, but she couldn't argue with results. Emma was thriving, and everyone who worked with her could see it. The question was, how far would Sarah go to prove she was right? The change in Emma didn't happen overnight, but it was unmistakable once it began. It started with small moments, the way she'd look up from her homework with excitement instead of anxiety, how she'd share interesting facts she'd learned without apologizing for being too smart. the gradual return of her natural curiosity. The first real breakthrough came during a creative writing assignment for Mrs. Rodriguez's class. Emma had been struggling with the prompt write about a hero in your community, because she kept second-guessing herself about what would be considered good enough. I don't know what to write, she said, staring at the blank page. All the other kids are probably writing about firefighters or police officers. What makes someone a hero to you? I asked, sitting beside her at the kitchen table. Someone who helps people even when it's hard. Someone who doesn't give up? That sounds like a good definition. Do you know anyone like that? Emma thought for a moment. Mrs. Patterson at the library. She helps all the kids with reading, even the ones who are really behind. And she never makes anyone feel dumb for asking questions. That's a great choice. What would you want people to know about her? Once Emma started writing, the words flowed. She wrote about Mrs. Patterson's patience with struggling readers, her knowledge of exactly which books would capture a reluctant student's interest, the way she remembered everyone's names and made them feel important. But what made the essay special wasn't just the subject, it was Emma's voice, her genuine admiration and detailed observations. When she finished, she read it aloud to me. The writing was beautiful, heartfelt, and showed a level of empathy and insight that took my breath away. Emma, this is incredible. You've captured exactly what makes Mrs. Patterson special. Really, it's not too simple. It's perfect because it's true, and it's written in your voice, not the voice you think someone else wants to hear. Mrs. Rodriguez's response was even better than I'd hoped. She not only gave Emma an A, but asked if she could share the essay with other teachers as an example of excellent descriptive writing. Emma has such a unique perspective. Mrs. Rodriguez told me during our next conference. She notices things other children miss, and she has a gift for expressing complex emotions in simple, powerful language. The success gave Emma confidence to take more creative risks. She started volunteering to read her work aloud during class sharing time. She raised her hand more often to contribute to discussions. Most importantly, she began to trust her own judgment about what was worth exploring. Our homework routine evolved into something that felt more like collaboration than supervision. Instead of me checking her work for correctness, we'd discuss what she'd learned, what questions had come up, what connections she'd made to other things she knew. I was reading about ancient Egypt, Emma said one evening, and I realized their pyramid shapes are related to the math patterns I've been working on. The geometric progression creates structural stability. Show me what you mean. Emma grabbed her notebook and started drawing diagrams, explaining how the mathematical principles she'd discovered on her own were actually fundamental to engineering and architecture. She wasn't just memorizing facts about history, she was making connections across disciplines, seeing patterns that revealed deeper understanding. I started encouraging Emma to pursue these connections wherever they led. When she became fascinated with fractals after seeing them in a nature documentary, we spent a weekend researching mathematical patterns in everything from snowflakes to fern leaves. When she read a story about space exploration and wondered about the physics of rocket propulsion, we found library books about aerospace engineering. You're allowed to be curious about anything, I told her. Smart people don't have to stay in their lane. The transformation was most visible in how Emma approached challenges. Instead of freezing up when she encountered something difficult, she began to see problems as puzzles to solve. When she couldn't understand a concept in her science textbook, she'd ask questions, seek out additional resources, or try to relate it to something she already knew. I think I learn better when I can see how things connect, she told me one day. Like I understand chemistry better when I think about cooking, because mixing ingredients is kind of like chemical reactions. That's exactly right. You're a pattern learner. You understand things by seeing how they relate to each other. Emma's confidence grew beyond academics. She started expressing opinions about books we read together, movies we watched, even decisions about how we spent our weekends. For years, she'd been trained to defer to adult authority, to assume others knew better than she did. Now she was learning to trust her own judgment. The biggest test came when Emma decided to enter the school's Young Writers Contest. The theme was Dreams for the Future, and Emma wrote a science fiction story about a world where creativity was the most valuable skill, where problem-solving and imagination were prized above memorization and conformity. It's about a girl who saves her planet by thinking differently, Emma explained. Everyone else tries to solve problems the same way, but she finds new solutions because she sees things others miss. The story was sophisticated, imaginative, and deeply personal. Emma had poured her own experiences into the narrative. The loneliness of feeling different, the joy of discovering that different could be valuable, the power of staying true to yourself even when others disapproved. Are you nervous about submitting it? I asked, a little, but also excited. I wrote something I really believe in. When the contest results were announced 3 weeks later, Emma won first place in her grade level. But more than the award, what mattered was how she received the news with pride, but not surprise. She was beginning to understand her own capabilities. The award ceremony was held on a Thursday evening in the school cafeteria. Emma stood at the podium, reading portions of her winning story to an audience of parents, teachers, and students. Her voice was clear and confident, and she looked up from her paper frequently to make eye contact with her audience. I sat in the back row, watching my daughter own her moment, and felt tears sting my eyes. This was the child Sarah had tried to mold into someone else's vision of success. This was the brilliant, creative, unique person who had been hiding under layers of anxiety and self-doubt. After the ceremony, Emma found me in the crowd, her blue ribbon clutched in her hand. "I did it, Daddy. I wrote something true, and people liked it. I'm so proud of you. Not just for winning, but for having the courage to share your voice." Emma hugged me tight. "Thank you for teaching me that my voice matters." As we walked home that night, Emma chattering excitedly about the other students' reactions to her story, I realized that we'd achieved something more valuable than any academic award. Emma had learned to value herself, her thoughts, her creativity, her unique way of seeing the world. She was no longer trying to be perfect. She was learning to be authentically, brilliantly herself. And for the first time since the custody battle began, I felt confident that we were building something that couldn't be taken away. The community center on Maple Street had seen better days. The paint was peeling, the carpet was worn thin, and the fluorescent lights hummed with the persistence of old age. But when I saw the flyer posted on the library bulletin board, "Free tutoring services, volunteers welcome," I knew I'd found something important. Ms. Rodriguez mentioned that Emma might benefit from some enrichment activities. I told the coordinator, an energetic woman named Linda, who looked like she could organize the world if given enough coffee and colored markers. "But most of the programs in town are pretty expensive." "That's exactly why we started this," Linda said, leading me through the maze of folding tables where volunteers worked with children of all ages. Not every kid who needs extra challenge or support has parents who can afford private tutoring. I watched a college student help a kindergartner sound out words, while at the next table, a retired teacher worked with a middle schooler on algebra. The atmosphere was relaxed but focused, with quiet conversations and occasional bursts of "I got it" echoing through the room. "We have volunteers with all kinds of backgrounds," Linda continued. "Retired teachers, graduate students, professionals who want to give back." "What kind of help is Emma looking for?" "She's ahead in most subjects, but I think she'd benefit from working with someone who understands gifted kids. She needs challenge, but also encouragement to think outside the box." Linda smiled. "I have just the person." Maria Santoche is a retired high school teacher who specialized in working with gifted students. She volunteers here 3 nights a week. Maria turned out to be exactly what Emma needed, patient but demanding, encouraging creativity while maintaining high standards. She was a small woman with silver hair and keen dark eyes that seemed to see right through to what Emma was really capable of. "Tell me about yourself, Emma," Maria said during their first session. "What do you love to learn about?" "I like writing stories and figuring out math patterns," Emma said shyly. "But sometimes I think my ideas are weird." "Weird how?" "Like I wrote a story about numbers that have personalities, and I've been working on equations that describe how flowers grow in spirals." Maria's face lit up. "Emma, those aren't weird ideas, they're sophisticated ones. You're making connections between abstract concepts and concrete applications. That's what real mathematicians and writers do." Over the next few weeks, Emma flourished. Under Maria's guidance, instead of just doing more advanced worksheets, Maria encouraged Emma to explore the intersection of her interests. They worked on writing exercises that incorporated mathematical concepts and math problems that required creative thinking. "Today we're going to write a story where the plot structure follows the Fibonacci sequence," Maria announced one evening. "Each scene has to build on the previous ones in a mathematical pattern." Emma's eyes widened with excitement. "So the story grows like a nautilus shell." Exactly. What made the tutoring program special wasn't just the academic support, it was the community. Emma met other kids who were struggling with being different, whether they were behind grade level or years ahead. She made friends with Marcus, a 9-year-old who was teaching himself programming, and Riley, a girl her age, who could solve calculus problems but struggled with reading. "It's nice to be around kids who don't think I'm weird for liking math," Emma told me one evening as we drove home from the center. "How do they treat each other? Like being smart is normal." Riley helped me with a story I was writing, and I showed Marcus how number patterns work in nature. Nobody acts like anyone else is showing off. I started volunteering at the center too, helping with basic car maintenance classes for teenagers. It felt good to contribute something, to be part of a community that valued what each person could offer. The real surprise came when other parents began approaching me for advice. Word had spread that the single dad who worked at Patterson's Auto was helping his daughter excel academically, and other families wanted to know how. "My son is really bright, but he's failing his classes," one mother confided. "His teacher says he's not applying himself, but I think he's bored." How did you figure out what Emma needed? I started listening to her instead of listening to what other people said she should be, I said, and I found people who understood how smart kids actually learn. I began sharing the resources I'd discovered: books, websites, strategies for advocacy. Soon there was an informal support group of parents meeting at the community center, sharing experiences and resources. Sarah's reaction to Emma's involvement in the tutoring program was predictably dismissive. Community center tutoring, she said when Emma mentioned it during a custody exchange. Emma, you need specialized instruction from credentialed professionals, not volunteers. But Maria used to teach gifted classes at the high school, Emma said, and she understands how my brain works. That's not the same as a formal gifted program with proper assessment and placement. After Sarah left, Emma was unusually quiet. Finally, she asked, Daddy, is there something wrong with getting help from regular people instead of fancy programs? Emma, the best teachers are people who care about their students and understand how they learn. It doesn't matter if they work at an expensive school or volunteer at a community center. Maria says that learning happens when someone believes in you and challenges you at the same time. Maria's right. The validation of Emma's progress came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Rodriguez requested a meeting to discuss Emma's recent academic performance, and I braced myself for criticism about the unconventional approach we'd taken. Instead, she was enthusiastic. Mr. Thompson, I don't know what you've been doing, but Emma is a different student. She's more engaged, more confident, more willing to take intellectual risks. Her work shows depth and creativity that I haven't seen before. She's been working with a tutor at the community center, and I've been trying to support her interests at home. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Emma is finally working at a level that matches her potential. That evening, I shared the news with Maria and the other parents at the community center. The celebration felt different from the achievement-focused praise Emma had grown up with. These people were proud of Emma's growth, not just her grades. You know what I love about this place, Emma said as we packed up her notebooks that night. Everyone here thinks kids can be smart in different ways. Nobody tries to make you fit into a box. As we walked the car, I realized that the community center had given us something more valuable than academic support. It had provided Emma with a peer group where intelligence was celebrated rather than hidden, where differences were valued rather than minimized. For the first time, Emma understood that being gifted wasn't something she had to carry alone. She was part of a community of learners who supported each other's growth and celebrated each other's successes. Sarah might have resources and credentials, but we had something she'd never understood: the power of a community that believed in every child's potential to shine. The science fair was Emma's idea. She'd been working on a project about mathematical patterns in nature for weeks, combining her love of numbers with her fascination with the natural world. When she learned that the school was hosting its annual science fair, she asked if she could enter. Are you sure you want to? I asked. It's a lot of work, and you'll be competing against older kids too. Emma's response surprised me. 6 months earlier, she would have worried about not being good enough, about disappointing people, about standing out in the wrong way. Now she just smiled with quiet confidence. I want to show people what I've discovered, she said. I think they'll find it interesting. Emma's project was ambitious. She'd documented mathematical patterns in everything from sunflower seed spirals to the branching of tree limbs, from the geometry of honeycomb cells to the logarithmic curves of nautilus shells. But it wasn't just observation. Emma had developed her own formulas to predict these patterns and had even created original artwork based on her mathematical discoveries. The Fibonacci sequence appears everywhere in nature, she explained as we worked on her display board. But it's not just decoration. These patterns exist because they're the most efficient way to organize space and resources. Math isn't separate from nature, it's nature's language. I watched my daughter work with focus and enthusiasm I'd never seen before. She was completely absorbed in her project, driven by genuine curiosity rather than external pressure. When she encountered problems, her graphs didn't format correctly, her calculations needed double-checking, she approached them as interesting challenges rather than sources of anxiety. Need help with anything? I offered. Actually, yes. Can you help me figure out how to explain logarithmic spirals to kids who haven't learned about logarithms yet? We spent an hour developing analogies and visual aids that would make complex mathematical concepts accessible to elementary school audiences. Emma was learning to be both scholar and teacher, to understand her subjects deeply enough to share them with others. The week before the science fair, Emma's confidence was tested when Sarah saw the project during a custody visit. This is very creative, Sarah said, examining Emma's display with barely concealed disappointment. But Emma, science fair projects are supposed to follow the scientific method. Hypothesis, experiment, conclusion. This looks more like an art project. Emma's face fell. But I did use the scientific method. I hypothesized that mathematical patterns would appear consistently across different natural systems. Then I collected data to test it. Real science projects test variables under controlled conditions, Sarah continued. They produce measurable results that can be replicated. This is more like ... observation. I watched Emma's confidence waver, saw her starting to say, months of passionate work. This was the moment that would determine whether she trusted her own judgment or reverted to seeking approval from others. Mom, Emma said quietly, Maria says that the best science starts with careful observation of patterns. Darwin developed his theories by observing finches. Einstein developed relativity by thinking about mathematical relationships. Sometimes, the most important discoveries come from seeing connections others have missed. Sarah looked surprised by Emma's response. Well, I just hope the judges understand what you're trying to demonstrate. That night, Emma was quiet as we put the finishing touches on her display. Are you worried about what Mom said? I asked a little. What if the judges think it's not scientific enough? Emma, do you think your project is scientific? Yes. I formed a hypothesis, gathered evidence, analyzed data, and drew conclusions. Plus, I used math to predict patterns I found in new subjects. Then, you've done science, real science, the kind that matters. But what if I don't win anything? I stopped working and looked at her directly. Emma, 6 months ago, you were hiding your notebooks under your mattress because you thought your ideas weren't valuable. Now you've spent weeks developing an original research project because you're excited to share what you've discovered. That's already winning. The science fair was held on a Friday evening in the school gymnasium. Tables lined the walls, displaying projects from kindergarten through 8th grade. Emma's exhibit was positioned between a 3rd grader's volcano and a 7th grader's analysis of battery effectiveness. I watched Emma set up her display with growing pride. Her presentation was professional, thorough, and beautiful. Her mathematical formulas were clearly explained, her nature photographs were stunning, and her original artwork based on natural patterns was genuinely impressive. When the judging began, Emma stood beside her project answering questions with poise and enthusiasm. I overheard her explaining logarithmic spirals to a judge using shells and pine cones as visual aids, making complex mathematics accessible through concrete examples. So you're suggesting that mathematics isn't just a human invention, but a fundamental principle of how nature organizes itself? One judge asked. Exactly, Emma's face lit up. We didn't invent these patterns, we discovered them. They were already there. The crowd of parents and students who gathered around Emma's display grew as the evening progressed. Kids were fascinated by her shell collection and asked question after question about how she'd discovered the patterns. Adults were impressed by the sophistication of her mathematical analysis and the clarity of her explanations. Mrs. Rodriguez stopped by with several other teachers. Emma, this is remarkable work. The connections you've made between mathematics and biology are exactly what we hope to see from advanced students. Thank you, Emma said. I want to keep studying how math explains the world around us. When the awards were announced, Emma won first place in the elementary division and received a special recognition for most creative application of mathematical principles. But what made the evening truly special wasn't the ribbons, it was watching Emma own her expertise, share her passion, and inspire other kids to see mathematics as beautiful rather than intimidating. A 5th grader approached Emma after the ceremony. Your project made me want to look for patterns in nature too. Can you teach me how to find Fibonacci spirals? Of course, Emma said. Start by looking at sunflowers and pine cones. Once you see the pattern, you'll start noticing it everywhere. As we packed up Emma's materials, I felt a profound sense of transformation not just in Emma, but in myself. I'd started this custody battle feeling inadequate, doubting my ability to provide what my gifted daughter needed. Now I was watching Emma thrive in ways I'd never imagined possible. Dad, Emma said as we loaded her project into the car. Thank you for believing my ideas were worth exploring. Thank you for teaching me that there are many ways to be smart. Sarah had attended the science fair, standing in the back of the gymnasium with her arms crossed, watching Emma's presentation with an expression I couldn't read. She left without speaking to either of us, but I saw her pause at Emma's display, reading every word of the research summary. The next week brought unexpected validation. Mrs. Rodriguez called to tell me that Emma's science teacher wanted to nominate her project for the regional science fair. The high school's gifted program coordinator had also asked to meet with Emma about potential acceleration opportunities. The feedback has been overwhelmingly positive, Mrs. Rodriguez said. Emma's work demonstrates the kind of interdisciplinary thinking we're trying to encourage in all our students, but the most meaningful response came from Maria at the community center. Emma's project represents everything we hope to achieve, Maria told me. She identified her own interests, pursued them with depth and rigor, and learned to share her knowledge with others. That's real education. Emma's transformation was complete, but it went far beyond academic achievement. She carried herself differently now, with confidence that came from knowing her own mind, with pride that came from pursuing authentic interests, with security that came from unconditional love and support. When kids at school called her brainy, she no longer saw it as an insult. When teachers challenged her to think more deeply, she no longer worried about being wrong. When she encountered concepts she didn't understand, she no longer assumed she wasn't smart enough. I figured out something important, Emma told me one evening, as we worked on her latest story, a fantasy novel she'd been writing in chapters. Being smart isn't about getting everything right the first time. It's about being curious enough to keep learning. That's very wise. And being gifted doesn't mean I have to be perfect. It means I get to explore ideas that excite me. As I tucked Emma into bed that night, I reflected on how far we'd both come. The scared, anxious child who'd moved into my apartment 6 months earlier had been replaced by a confident young scholar who knew her own worth. Emma had learned to trust her intellect, value her creativity, and share her gifts with the world. But more importantly, she'd learned that being loved and being successful weren't mutually exclusive, that the people who truly cared about her wanted her to flourish as herself, not as someone else's vision of what she should become. The science fair had been more than an academic achievement. It had been Emma's declaration of independence, proof that she could pursue her own interests, think her own thoughts, and contribute something valuable to the world. Sarah could criticize our methods, question our resources, and doubt our approach, but she couldn't argue with the evidence standing right in front of her. A brilliant, confident, joyful child who was finally free to be exactly who she was meant to be. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was under the hood of a 2018 Honda Civic, wrestling with a stubborn alternator. My phone buzzed insistently from my workbench until Jimmy finally answered it. "Marcus, it's the school psychologist. Says, it's about Emma's test results." I wiped my hands on a rag and took the phone, my heart hammering. 3 weeks earlier, Mrs. Rodriguez had arranged for Emma to take a comprehensive assessment IQ testing, academic achievement measures, and psychological evaluation. It was supposed to determine whether Emma qualified for the school's gifted program and what kind of educational support she might need. "Mr. Thompson, this is Dr. Sarah Chen from the district. I have Emma's test results, and I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss them with you. Is everything okay?" "Everything is more than okay. When would you be available to come in?" The meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. I spent the intervening days alternating between excitement and anxiety, wondering what the tests had revealed about my daughter. Emma seemed remarkably calm about the whole thing. "They were actually kind of fun," she said when I asked about the testing experience. "Dr. Chen let me solve puzzles and work on problems that made me think it wasn't like school tests where there's only one right answer." Dr. Chen's office was warm and welcoming, filled with books and games and comfortable chairs. She was a woman, in her 40s with kind eyes and an easy smile, and she put me at ease immediately. "Mr. Thompson, I want to start by saying that Emma is a remarkable child, not just because of her test scores, but because of her approach to learning and problems." She opened a thick folder and spread several documents across her desk. Emma's IQ score places her in the highly gifted range 99th percentile for her age group. But what's more interesting is the pattern of her abilities. Dr. Chen pointed to different sections of the report. She shows exceptional strength in mathematical reasoning, verbal comprehension, and what we call fluid intelligence, the ability to think logically and solve novel problems. Her creativity scores are off the charts. I stared at the numbers, trying to process what they meant. So she really is as smart as I thought she was. She's significantly more advanced than typical children her age. In some areas, she's performing at a high school level. But Mr. Thompson, what impressed me most wasn't just her intelligence. It was her emotional maturity and her ability to articulate her thinking process. Dr. Chen pulled out another sheet. I asked Emma to explain how she approaches problems, and her response was fascinating. She said, "I try to see patterns and connections that might not be obvious at first. And if one way doesn't work, I think about the problem from a different angle." That sounds like Emma. What's remarkable is that she's developed these skills thinking largely on her own. Most gifted programs spend considerable time teaching these strategies explicitly. Dr. Chen leaned forward, her expression becoming more serious. "Mr. Thompson, I need to ask you about Emma's educational history. Has she always performed at this level?" I told her about the years of anxiety and underperformance, about Sarah's pressure and Emma's hidden notebooks, about the transformation since she'd been living with me. "That makes perfect sense." Dr. Chen nodded. Gifted children often underperform when they're in environments that don't match their learning needs. Emma's recent flourishing suggests she's finally in a situation that allows her to show her true capabilities. So what does this mean for her education? That's what we need to discuss. Emma is clearly ready for more challenging academic work. We have several options: acceleration, enrichment programs, specialized curriculum. But the most important thing is maintaining the emotional support that's allowed her to thrive. Dr. Chun showed me information about the district's gifted program, accelerated learning opportunities, and specialized summer camps. But she also emphasized something that surprised me. "Mr. Thompson, Emma expressed very clearly that she wants to stay in her current school with her current teacher. She's formed important relationships and feels secure in her environment. That's not something we should disrupt lightly." "She told you that," she said. "I like where I am now. Mrs. Rodriguez understands me, and my dad helps me learn about things I'm interested in. I don't want to be moved somewhere else just because I'm smart." I felt a surge of pride. Emma had learned to advocate for herself, to express her needs and preferences clearly. "So what do you recommend?" "A blended approach. Emma can remain in her regular classroom for social and emotional development, but we'll provide enrichment opportunities, advanced materials, and the option to work ahead in areas where she's ready. Plus, she can continue with the community tutoring program that's been so beneficial." Dr. Chen handed me a copy of the full report. "Mr. Thompson, these results confirm what you've obviously known for a while. Emma is an exceptionally gifted child. but more importantly, they show that she's a well-adjusted, emotionally healthy, gifted child. That's not always the case. That evening, I sat with Emma at our kitchen table. The test results spread between us. "So it turns out you're officially a genius?" I said. Emma grinned. "Does that mean I get a cape?" "It means you get to keep being exactly who you are, just with some extra challenges to keep your brain happy." Emma studied the numbers on the report. "These scores are really high, aren't they?" "Really high. Am I going to have to change schools?" "Not unless you want to. Dr. Chen thinks you're doing great where you are." Emma looked relieved. "Good. I like my life the way it is now." The next morning, I called Margaret to share the news. She was thrilled but not surprised. "Marcus, this validates everything you've been doing. Emma is thriving under your care, and now you have official documentation to prove it." "What about Sarah? She's going to want to use this to argue for specialized programs. Let her try." The report also documents Emma's emotional well-being and her preference for her current situation. No judge is going to disrupt an arrangement that's clearly working. Sarah's reaction was exactly what I expected. When I shared the test results during our next custody exchange, her eyes widened as she read the scores. "These numbers are incredible," she said. "Emma, do you understand what this means? You're qualified for the most competitive, gifted programs in the state." "I know," Emma said simply. "But I like where I go to school now." "Emma, this changes everything. We need to get you into a program that can challenge you appropriately. Regular school isn't enough anymore, but I am being challenged. Maria gives me advanced work, and Dad helps me explore my own interests." Sarah looked at me with a mixture of frustration and something else, possibly respect. "I have to admit, Marcus, whatever you're doing seems to be working." It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I'd ever received from her. That weekend, Emma and I celebrated the test results with a trip to the Science Museum. As we wandered through exhibits about space exploration and natural history, Emma peppered me with questions about everything we saw. "Dad, now that we know I'm officially gifted, does that change anything?" "What do you think it should change?" "I don't know. Maybe I should feel more pressure to be perfect." I stopped walking and knelt down to her level. "Emma, you were just as smart last week as you are today. The only thing that changed is that some adults filled out some paperwork about it. You're still the same amazing kid you've always been, so I don't have to be different now. The only thing you have to be is yourself." As we continued through the museum, I reflected on how much these test results meant, not because they told us anything new about Emma, but because they provided official validation of what we'd always known. Emma was brilliant, creative, and capable of incredible things. But more importantly, she was happy, confident, and secure in who she was. The numbers on the test report were impressive, but they couldn't measure the most important thing. Emma had learned to value herself for exactly who she was, gifts and all. The court motion arrived on a Friday afternoon, hand-delivered by the same uncomfortable-looking process server who'd brought the original divorce papers. This time, though, I wasn't caught off guard. I'd been expecting Sarah to make another move ever since Emma's test results had been released. "Petition for modification of custody based on changed circumstances," I read aloud to Margaret over the phone. "She's arguing that Emma's giftedness requires specialized educational resources I can't provide." "What specific claims is she making?" I flipped through the pages, feeling my anger build with each accusation. That I'm educationally neglecting Emma by not enrolling her in formal gifted programs. That the community center tutoring is inadequate for a child of Emma's caliber. That I lack the intellectual capacity to support Emma's academic development. Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, this is desperation. Sarah sees that Emma is thriving with you, and she's grasping at straws. But what if the judge believes her? What if they think Emma would be better off in some elite program? Then we show them the evidence. Emma's happiness, her academic progress, her emotional well-being, and we have Dr. Chen's report supporting your current approach. Still, the legal challenge sent me into a spiral of maybe Sarah was right. Maybe Emma did need resources I couldn't provide. Maybe my blue-collar background really was holding her back from opportunities she deserved." Emma sensed my anxiety immediately. She found me that evening sitting at the kitchen table, staring at Sarah's legal filing. "Dad, what's wrong?" I tried to smile. "Just some grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." "Is it about Mom wanting me to live with her again?" I looked at my daughter's concerned face and made a decision. Emma was old enough to understand what was happening, and she deserved honesty. "Your mom thinks you need different kinds of educational programs because of your test scores. She's asking the court to reconsider our custody arrangement." Emma was quiet for a long moment. "What kind of programs?" "Specialized schools for gifted kids, advanced classes, things that cost money and require ... I struggled for the right words. "Things that require the kind of background your mom has." "You think I need those things?" "I think you need to be challenged and supported and loved. If those programs would help you, we'll find a way to make them happen." "But Emma, what do you think you need?" Emma sat beside me, and I was struck by how mature she looked, how thoughtfully she was considering the question. "I need to keep learning new things. I need people who believe in my ideas. I need to feel safe to be myself." She paused. I have all those things now. But what if there are opportunities out there that would help you even more? Dad, I've been reading about those gifted schools online. Some of the kids there seem really stressed and competitive. They focus so much on being the smartest that they forget about being happy. Over the next few weeks, Sarah's campaign intensified. She sent Emma home from visits with brochures for elite private schools, applications for competitive summer programs, and printouts about maximizing gifted potential. Look at this academy, Sarah told Emma during one visit, showing her glossy materials from a prestigious boarding school. Students here go to Ivy League colleges at 15. You could be one of them, but I don't want to go to college at 15, Emma said when she told me about the conversation. I want to be a kid first. Did you tell your mom that? I tried, but she said I was thinking too small, that I needed to have bigger dreams. Sarah also began questioning every aspect of Emma's education with me. She demanded detailed reports on Emma's tutoring sessions, criticized the books Emma was reading as insufficiently challenging, and expressed concern that I was letting Emma waste time on creative writing instead of focusing on STEM subjects. The breaking point came when Sarah showed up unannounced at the community center during one of Emma's tutoring sessions. I was in the parking lot waiting for Emma when I saw Sarah's car pull up. "What's she doing here?" Maria asked when Sarah walked into the tutoring room. "I wanted to observe Emma's educational support firsthand," Sarah announced. "I have concerns about the quality of instruction she's receiving." I watched through the window as Sarah sat in the corner, taking notes while Maria worked with Emma on a geometry problem. Emma kept glancing nervously at her mother, her usual enthusiasm dampened by the scrutiny. After the session, Sarah approached Maria directly. "Ms. Santos, what are your credentials for working with highly gifted children?" Maria's response was diplomatic, but firm. "I have 30 years of experience teaching mathematics and working with advanced students. More importantly, I understand Emma's learning style and interests. But do you have specific training in gifted education methodology?" "I have training in recognizing and nurturing mathematical talent wherever I find it." Sarah turned to me. "Marcus, Emma needs teachers with advanced degrees in gifted education, not well-meaning volunteers. Emma needs teachers who see her potential and help her develop it," I replied. Maria has been doing exactly that. That night, Emma was unusually quiet during dinner. Finally, she spoke up. "Dad, am I disappointing Mom because I'm not learning fast enough? What makes you think that?" "She keeps talking about all these kids, who are younger than me, but doing more advanced work. She says I should be further ahead." I felt my heart break a little. "Emma, you're exactly where you should be. For you, there's no timeline for learning, no race you need to win. But what if I could be doing better?" "You are doing better. You're doing better than you've ever done, and you're happy while you're doing it. That's what matters." The legal pressure continued building. Sarah's lawyer sent demands for Emma's educational records, questioned the validity of the community center tutoring, and suggested that I was limiting Emma's potential by not pursuing more aggressive academic acceleration. Margaret and I prepared our response carefully, documenting Emma's progress, gathering statements from her teachers and tutors, and highlighting the emotional and social benefits of our approach. "The interesting thing about Sarah's filing," Margaret noted, "is that she's not arguing Emma is struggling or unhappy. She's arguing that Emma could theoretically be doing more. Is that enough to change custody? Not if we can show that Emma is thriving under current arrangements and that her own preferences matter." The night before our court date, Emma found me reviewing my notes for the hearing. "Dad, can I tell the judge what I think?" "What would you want to tell her? That I'm not a problem that needs to be solved? I'm a kid who's learning to love learning, and that's more important than how fast I do it." Looking at my confident, articulate daughter, I realized that Sarah's desperation had actually revealed something important. Emma didn't need to be rescued from our life. She needed to be protected from people who would reduce her to test scores and achievements. Emma had found her voice, discovered her strengths, and learned to value herself. No elite program could give her anything more valuable than that. Tomorrow, we'd have to prove it to a judge. The envelope was waiting in our mailbox when Emma and I returned from her tutoring session on a crisp October afternoon. I recognized the school district's logo immediately, and my heart skipped a beat. Report cards, the culmination of everything we'd worked toward over the past 8 months. "Is that my grades?" Emma asked, noticing my suddenly tense expression. "Looks like it," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "Want to open it together?" We climbed the stairs to our apartment, Emma chattering about the math problem she'd solved with Maria, while I felt the weight of the envelope in my hands. This wasn't just a report card, it was evidence. Proof of whether our approach had actually worked. Whether love and support and nurturing Emma's natural gifts had translated into measurable success. In the kitchen, Emma sat across from me at our small table, the same table where she'd struggled with homework just months earlier, where she'd hidden her creative writing, where she'd slowly learned to trust her own intelligence. "Ready?" I asked. Emma nodded, though I could see nervousness flickering in her eyes. I opened the envelope carefully and unfolded the report card. For a moment, I couldn't process what I was seeing, then my vision focused, and I felt my breath catch. Straight A's, not just A's, but A+ in every subject except one, and that was an A in physical education. Reading, mathematics, science, social studies, art, music hall, A+. But it was the comments from her teachers that made my eyes fill with tears. Emma demonstrates exceptional analytical thinking and creative problem solving, Mrs. Rodriguez had written. She approaches challenges with enthusiasm and persistence. Her writing shows remarkable sophistication and originality. From her math teacher, Emma has mastered all grade-level concepts and consistently works beyond expectations. She helps other students understand difficult concepts and shows natural mathematical intuition. Her science teacher wrote, Emma's science fair project demonstrated the kind of interdisciplinary thinking we hope to foster in all students. She asks thoughtful questions and pursues answers with genuine curiosity. But it was the note from the school librarian that made me smile. Emma is one of our most voracious readers. She's expanded from her comfort zone to explore new genres and consistently recommends books to other students. Her love of learning is contagious. Dad, Emma's voice was small. What does it say? I turned the report card around so she could see it. Emma's eyes widened as she scanned the grades, then grew even bigger as she read the comments. I got A's in everything. A+ in almost everything. Emma stared at the paper like she couldn't quite believe it was real. Even in subjects I thought I was bad at. Turns out you weren't bad at them. You just needed to learn them in a way that made sense to you. Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Dad, does this mean I'm really smart? Emma, this means you're really you. Smart, creative, hardworking, and capable of amazing things when you're supported and encouraged. She threw her arms around my neck, and I held her close, feeling overwhelmed by pride and gratitude and sheer relief. We'd done it. Not just the grades, though those were wonderful, but we'd helped Emma find herself, trust herself, believe in herself. That evening, I called Mrs. Rodriguez to thank her for the detailed comments on Emma's report card. Mr. Thompson, I hope you know how remarkable Emma's transformation has been, she said. At the beginning of the year, she was anxious, withdrawn, underperforming. Now she's one of my most engaged students. What made the difference? Do you think? Confidence. Emma stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be curious. She stopped hiding her intelligence and started sharing it. Most importantly, she stopped seeing learning as something she could fail at and started seeing it as something she could enjoy. After dinner, Emma spread her report card on the table beside her latest story, a fantasy novel she'd been working on 4 weeks about a girl who discovers that her supposed weaknesses are actually magical powers. Dad, I want to show this to Mom when I see her this weekend. Of course. Do you think she'll be proud? I thought about Sarah's reaction to Emma's science fair project, her criticism of our educational approach, her insistence that Emma needed formal, gifted programs to succeed. I think she'll be impressed, I said carefully. But will she understand that I'm happy too? That was the question, wasn't it? Would Sarah see these grades as validation of Emma's potential, or would she see them as proof that Emma could be pushed even harder, challenged even more, accelerated even faster? Emma, what matters most to you about this report card? She considered the question seriously, that it shows I can do well when I feel good about myself, and that all the things I love, and math patterns and asking questions, those are valuable too. Then that's what we'll focus on. One spent the evening making copies of the report card, one for our records, one for Margaret, one for Dr. Chen. Each copy felt like a small victory, tangible proof that our unconventional approach had worked. But, as I looked at those perfect grades and glowing comments, I realized the real achievement wasn't academic success. It was watching Emma transform from an anxious, self-doubting child into a confident young person who knew her own worth. The report card was wonderful, but it was just paper. What mattered was the bright, curious, joyful girl who'd earned those grades while staying true to herself. Still, I couldn't wait to see Sarah's face when she saw what Emma had accomplished. After months of criticism and doubt, after legal challenges and accusations of educational neglect, here was proof that couldn't be argued with or dismissed. Emma was thriving, not just academically, but emotionally, socially, creatively. She was becoming exactly who she was meant to be. And these grades were simply confirmation of what I'd known all along. My daughter was extraordinary, and now everyone else would know it too. I decided to let Emma share her report card with Sarah herself. After 8 months of being caught between her parents' conflicting approaches to her education, Emma deserved to own this moment, to present her achievements with the pride and confidence she'd worked so hard to develop. We met Sarah at her usual coffee shop for the custody exchange, a neutral location that had become routine for our handoff. Emma carried her backpack and a manila folder containing her report card, her latest story, and a math project she'd completed with Maria. Hi, Mom, Emma said, sliding into the booth across from Sarah. I have something to show you. Sarah smiled, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. The pending court hearing about custody modification was scheduled for the following week, and the strain of the legal battle was showing on both of us. What do you have there, sweetheart? Emma opened the folder and carefully placed her report card on the table. My first quarter grades. Sarah picked up the report card, and I watched her expression change as she scanned the grades. Her eyebrows rose with each A+, and by the time she reached the teacher comments, her mouth was slightly open. Emma, these are ... She looked up at our daughter with genuine surprise. These are exceptional. I worked really hard, Emma said, simply, and Dad helped me figure out how I learned best. Sarah read through the teacher comments twice, her expression shifting from surprise to something more complex, pride, mixed with confusion, maybe even a hint of frustration. Your writing scores are particularly impressive, Sarah said, and this comment about your mathematical intuition. Emma, this is the kind of performance I always knew you were capable of. Thanks, Mom. But then Sarah's expression hardened slightly as she processed the implications. Of course, this makes it even more important that we get you into a proper gifted program. Now that you're performing at this level, you need more advanced instruction. Emma's face fell slightly. But Mom, I'm happy with my school. Mrs. Rodriguez understands how I think, and Maria challenges me with really interesting problems. Emma, these grades prove you're ready for acceleration. We should be looking at grade skipping, specialized curricula, maybe even early college admission programs. I watched Emma's confidence waver as Sarah began planning her academic future. Without asking what Emma wanted, this was the old pattern Sarah seeing. Emma's achievements as stepping stones to the next level of pressure rather than celebrating them for what they were. Sarah, I interjected gently, maybe we should ask Emma what she wants. Sarah turned to me with the expression I'd learned to dread during our marriage, the look that said I was being naive, that I didn't understand the stakes involved. Marcus, this isn't about what Emma wants right now. This is about maximizing her potential. Children don't always know what's best for their future. But I do know, Emma said quietly, and something in her voice made both Sarah and I stop talking. I know that I like learning when it doesn't feel like a competition. I know that I want to be challenged but not pressured. I know that I want to stay at my school with my friends and my teachers who understand me. Sarah stared at Emma with surprise. This wasn't the compliant, eager to please child she was used to. Emma, you're 8 years old. You can't possibly understand the long-term implications of these decisions. I'm 9, Emma corrected, and I understand that I was miserable when you made all my decisions for me. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Sarah's face flushed, and I could see her struggling to maintain her composure. Emma, I only want what's best for you. Everything I've done has been to help you succeed. But Mom, I am succeeding. Look at my report card. Look at how happy I am. Why isn't that enough? Sarah's voice became sharper. Because the world is competitive, Emma. Because being happy doesn't guarantee you'll reach your potential. Because you have gifts that need to be developed properly. My gifts are being developed, Emma said with quiet firmness. I write stories that make people think. I solve math problems that teach me how the world works. I help other kids learn difficult concepts. I'm using my gifts every day. I could see Sarah's frustration building. This conversation wasn't going the way she'd expected. Emma's achievements should have validated Sarah's approach. Should have proved that Emma needed the kind of structured, hypershare environment Sarah advocated for instead. Emma was using her own success to argue for staying exactly where she was. Emma, you don't understand, Sarah said, her voice rising slightly. These grades are just the beginning. You could be doing so much more. You could be in advanced programs, competing with other gifted children, preparing for elite universities. What if I don't want to compete with other kids? What if I just want to learn because learning is fun? Sarah looked at Emma like she was speaking a foreign language. Fun, Emma. Education isn't about fun. It's about achievement, about building a foundation for your future success. That's when Emma did something that stunned both of us. She reached into her folder and pulled out her latest story, the fantasy novel she'd been working on about a girl whose supposed weaknesses turned out to be magical powers. Mom, I wrote this story about a girl who lives in a world where everyone has to prove they're the best at everything. But the girl discovers that when she stops trying to be better than everyone else and starts being herself, she can do magic. Emma opened the notebook and began reading aloud. Her voice was clear and confident as she shared passages about creativity being more powerful than competition, about the magic that happens when people are free to be authentically themselves. As Emma read, I watched Sarah's expression change. For a moment, the defensive anger faded, and I saw something else, maybe recognition, maybe regret. Emma, that's a beautiful story, Sarah said when Emma finished. You're a talented writer, thank you. Dad says my stories matter just as much as my test scores. Sarah looked at me then, and for the first time in months, I didn't see criticism or dismissal in her eyes. I saw something more complex: acknowledgement, maybe even respect. The report card is impressive, Marcus, she said quietly. I have to admit, whatever you're doing seems to be working. We're just letting Emma be herself while making sure she's challenged and supported. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying her daughter's face. Emma, are you really happy? Really happy, Emma said without hesitation. For the first time in a long time, I feel like myself. Sarah gathered up the report card and the story, handling them carefully. I need to think about some things. As we prepared to leave, Emma hugged both of us goodbye. But when she hugged Sarah, I heard her whisper, "I love you, Mom. I just want you to love who I really am." Walking to the car, Emma slipped her hand into mine. "Dad, do you think Mom understands now?" "I think she's starting to. I hope so, because I want her to be proud of who I am, not disappointed about who I'm not." As I watched Sarah drive away with Emma for their weekend visit, I felt something shift. The confrontation hadn't gone the way either of us had expected. Instead of a battle over Emma's future, it had become Emma's declaration of independence, unclear statement of who she was and what she needed. For the first time since the custody battle began, I felt like Sarah might finally be ready to listen to our daughter instead of trying to shape her into someone else's vision of success. The question was, would it be enough to change everything? I pulled out my phone and started recording a voice memo as I drove home alone, not for legal purposes, but because I wanted to remember this moment. The moment when Emma found her voice and used it to speak her truth with courage and clarity. "Emma stood up for herself today," I said into the phone. "She didn't just share her achievements, she defended her right to be happy while achieving them." Sarah heard something in Emma's voice that she'd never heard before. Not defiance, but certainty. Emma knows who she is now. As I turned into our apartment complex, I realized that whatever happened in court next week, we'd already won the most important battle. Emma had learned to value herself, to trust her own judgment, and to articulate what she needed to thrive. That was worth more than any custody arrangement or legal victory. That was the foundation for a lifetime of success in Emma's own terms. The courtroom felt different this time. 8 months earlier, I'd sat in the same gallery, feeling like an imposter, convinced that everyone could see through my pretense of being a competent father. Now I sat beside Margaret with a folder full of evidence: Emma's report card, teacher evaluations, her science fair awards, Dr. Chen's psychological assessment, and dozens of examples of Emma's creative work. But the most important evidence wasn't in any folder. It was sitting in the witness chair, answering Judge Hendrick's questions with the poise and confidence of a child who knew exactly who she was. "Emma," Judge Hendrick said gently, "I'd like to ask you about your schooling. How do you feel about your education right now?" "I love learning," Emma said without hesitation. "For the first time, school feels like exploring instead of performing." Sarah's lawyer had spent an hour presenting his case charts showing Emma's exceptional test scores, brochures from elite gifted programs, testimony from education experts about the importance of maximizing gifted children's potential. It was all very impressive and completely missed the point, Your Honor, Sarah's attorney concluded. Emma's extraordinary abilities require extraordinary educational resources. While Mr. Thompson's efforts are commendable, a child of Emma's caliber needs specialized instruction that only formal gifted programs can provide. When it was our turn, Margaret kept it simple. She let Emma's report card speak for itself, played audio recordings of Emma explaining her science project to museum visitors, and presented testimony from Mrs. Rodriguez about Emma's dramatic transformation. But the turning point came when Judge Hendricks asked Emma directly about her preferences. "Emma, your mother believes you would benefit from specialized schools for gifted children. How do you feel about that?" Emma took a breath, and I saw her glance at both Sarah and me before answering. "Your Honor, I think being gifted means I get to learn in the way that works best for me. Right now, I'm challenged academically, I'm happy socially, and I'm growing as a person. Those things are more important to me than going to a school just because it's for smart kids." Judge Hendricks leaned forward. "Can you explain what you mean by that?" "Well, at my school now, I get to help other kids understand math concepts, which teaches me as much as solving hard problems. I write stories that Mrs. Rodriguez shares with other classes. I work with Maria at the community center on projects that combine different subjects. I'm not just learning facts, I'm learning how to think and how to help others think too." "And how do you feel when you're at home with your father versus when you're visiting your mother?" Emma was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I love both my parents, but with Dad, I feel like I'm enough exactly as I am. I feel safe to try new things, even if I might fail. I feel like my ideas matter, even if they're different from what other people expect." Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat. This wasn't the compliant, achievement-focused child she thought she knew. "And when you're with your mother, with Mom, I feel like I need to prove I'm worthy of being smart. Like my achievements are more important than my happiness." The words hung in the courtroom like an indictment. Sarah's face went pale, and I saw her hands clench in her lap. Judge Hendricks made notes, then looked up. "Emma, if you could design your perfect educational situation, what would it look like?" Emma's face lit up with enthusiasm. "I'd stay at my current school because I love my teacher and my friends. I'd keep working with Maria because she challenges me mathematically while letting me explore connections to other subjects. I'd have time to write stories and work on creative projects, and I'd have support for pursuing whatever interests develop as I grow up." "That sounds very thoughtful. Is that what you have now?" "Yes, ma'am, that's exactly what I have now." After Emma's testimony, Sarah asked to address the court directly. Judge Hendricks allowed it, and Sarah stood with the composure she'd always shown in professional settings. Your Honor, I've spent the last few days reflecting on my daughter's words and her father's approach to her education. I realize I've been so focused on Emma's potential that I lost sight of Emma herself. Sarah's voice wavered slightly. The report card and teacher comments Mr. Thompson presented show that Emma is thriving academically. But more importantly, listening to Emma today, I can see that she's thriving emotionally and socially as well. That wasn't always the case when she was in my primary care. I felt a surge of surprise and respect. This couldn't be easy for Sarah to admit. I still believe Emma has exceptional gifts that should be nurtured, Sarah continued. But I'm beginning to understand that nurturing doesn't mean pushing. It means providing the support and challenges that allow a child to flourish as themselves. Judge Hendricks listened carefully, then made her ruling. This case has been instructive for the court. We've seen clear evidence that Emma is not only performing exceptionally well academically, but is also emotionally secure and socially well-adjusted. Most importantly, Emma herself has articulated a clear understanding of her own needs and preferences. She looked directly at Sarah. Mrs. Martinez, while your concerns about maximizing Emma's potential are understandable, the court must prioritize Emma's overall well-being. The evidence shows that Emma is thriving under her current arrangement. Then she turned to me. Mr. Thompson, you've demonstrated that effective parenting isn't about having all the resources. It's about understanding your child's needs and advocating for them appropriately. Therefore, this court denies the petition for custody modification. The current arrangement will remain in place, with the addition that both parents will attend family counseling to improve communication about Emma's needs. The gavel came down, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But more than that, I felt vindicated, not just legally, but personally. We'd proven that love, understanding, and advocacy could create an environment where a gifted child could flourish. After the hearing, Sarah approached Emma and me in the hallway. Her composure had cracked slightly, and I could see real emotion in her eyes. Emma, I owe you an apology, she said, kneeling down to Emma's level. I've been so worried about your future that I forgot to pay attention to your present. You're clearly happy and successful, and that's what matters most. Emma hugged her mother. I love you, Mom. I just want you to love who I am now, not just who I might become. I do love who you are now, Sarah said, and for the first time in years, I believe she meant it. As we walked to our cars, Sarah stopped me. Marcus, I need to say something. You've done an incredible job with Emma. I was wrong to question your capabilities. We've both learned a lot, I said. The important thing is that Emma is thriving. Yes, Sarah agreed. She really is. That evening, Emma and I celebrated with pizza and a movie marathon. As we settled on the couch, Emma curled up beside me with a contented sigh. Dad, does this mean things will stay the same? It means you get to keep being exactly who you are, living exactly the life that makes you happy and helps you grow. Good, Emma said. I like our life. As I watched my daughter drift off to sleep during the second movie, I reflected on how far we'd both come. Emma had found her voice, her confidence, and her sense of self. I'd learned that being a good father wasn't about having all the answers. It was about listening to your child and advocating for their authentic needs. The custody battle was over. But more importantly, Emma's journey to understanding her own worth was complete. She knew she was smart, talented, and valuable exactly as she was. That was a victory that would last a lifetime. 1 year later, I stood in the bank with Emma, watching her carefully write her name on the signature card for her first savings account. The account wasn't for toys or games, it was her college fund, something I'd been able to start after getting a promotion to shop supervisor and taking on some evening teaching at the community college's automotive program. How much should I put in first? Emma asked, holding the $20 bill she'd earned from selling one of her stories to the school literary magazine. Whatever feels right to you, I said. It's your account. Emma deposited $15 and kept $5 for spending money, a decision that showed the practical wisdom she'd developed over the past year. She understood delayed gratification now, but she also understood the value of enjoying the present. The bank teller, Mrs. Chen, smiled as she processed the deposit. Starting early is smart. Emma, what are you planning to study in college? I'm not sure yet, Emma said confidently. Maybe creative writing and mathematics, or maybe something that doesn't exist yet. As we walked home from the bank, Emma chattering about her latest story idea, a science fiction tale about mathematical patterns in space, I reflected on how much had changed since that day I'd first received custody papers. Emma was now one of the top students in her class, but more importantly, she was one of the happiest. She'd found her place in a community that valued her unique gifts while allowing her to be a normal kid. Her teachers described her as curious, confident, and kind, adjectives that would serve her well throughout her life. The tutoring program at the community center had grown, partly due to Emma's enthusiasm and success. Maria now coordinated a formal gifted education support group, and I'd started volunteering to teach basic car maintenance to teenagers. We'd created something that benefited everyone, a place where different kinds of intelligence were celebrated and nurtured. Sarah had kept her word about the family counseling, and our co-parenting relationship had improved dramatically. She still had high expectations for Emma, but she'd learned to express them in ways that supported rather than pressured. Emma's visits with her mother were now eagerly anticipated rather than sources of anxiety. "Dad, remember when you used to worry that you weren't smart enough to help me?" Emma asked as we climbed the stairs to our apartment. "I remember. That was silly. You're the smartest dad I know." "What makes you say that?" "Because you figured out that there are different ways to be smart. You helped me find mine." That evening, Emma spread her homework across the kitchen table, the same table where she'd once struggled with assignments that felt impossible, where she'd hidden her creative notebooks, where she'd slowly learned to trust her own intelligence. Now she approached her schoolwork with enthusiasm and confidence, seeing each assignment as an opportunity to learn something new. "I'm working on a project about family histories," she said, pulling out a thick folder. "I interviewed you and Mom and Grandma about our family's story." She showed me pages of carefully recorded interviews, family photos, and a written narrative that traced our family's journey through immigration, hard work, and dreams. But the most interesting part was Emma's analysis of how different family members had shown intelligence and creativity in their own ways. "I wrote about how great-grandpa was a master carpenter who could build anything without blueprints," Emma explained, "and how Grandma raised 5 kids while working and still found time to paint, and how you figured out how to help me learn. By paying attention to how my mind works, what did you conclude about intelligence? That it comes in lots of different forms, and the most important thing is using whatever gifts you have to help yourself and other people." As Emma worked on her project, I started dinner and thought about the unexpected ways our lives had evolved. I'd become an advocate for gifted education, speaking at parent meetings and school board sessions about the importance of understanding different learning styles. Emma had become a peer tutor, helping younger students with both academic work and confidence building. We'd both discovered that our supposed disadvantages, my blue-collar background, Emma's sensitivity and intensity, were actually sources of strength when embraced rather than hidden. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Mrs. Rodriguez with exciting news. "Mr. Thompson, I wanted to let you know that Emma's been selected for the Regional Young Writers Conference. It's a program for exceptionally talented student writers, and Emma's portfolio impressed the selection committee." "That's wonderful. What does it involve?" "A week-long intensive workshop with published authors, plus the opportunity to have her work published in an anthology. Emma would be the youngest participant in the program's history." I looked at Emma, bent over her homework with complete focus, and felt a familiar surge of pride. Not because she'd been selected for something prestigious, but because she'd found her passion and was pursuing it with joy and determination. "What does Emma think about it?" "I haven't told her yet. I wanted to check with you first. Let me discuss it with her tonight. She's gotten pretty good at knowing what opportunities excite her versus what feels like pressure." After dinner, I shared the news about the writers' conference. Emma's eyes lit up with genuine excitement. "Really? I'd get to work with real authors. Real authors who started out just like you with stories they wanted to tell. And other kids who love writing as much as I do." "Exactly." Emma was quiet for a moment, considering, would it interfere with my regular school or my tutoring with Maria? "It's during summer break, so no conflicts." "Then yes, I definitely want to do it." What struck me about Emma's response was how naturally she evaluated the opportunity. She didn't automatically assume she should do it because it was prestigious, nor did she hesitate because of some. She simply assessed whether it aligned with her interests and goals, then made a confident decision. That night, as I tucked Emma into bed, she asked a question that took me by surprise. "Dad, are you proud of who you've become?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you like the person you are now better than the person you were when you were married to Mom?" I considered the question seriously. The man I'd been during my marriage had been constantly doubting himself, apologizing for his background, trying to be someone else's version of success. Now I was comfortable with who I was: a good father, a skilled mechanic, a contributing member of my community. "Yes," I said. "I like who I am now much better." "Me too," Emma said. "I like who I am when I'm with you. You're pretty great just as you are." "We both are," Emma said with a smile. "We figured out how to be ourselves." As I turned off her light and headed to my own room, I realized Emma was right. Our journey hadn't just been about proving that I could be a good father or that Emma could succeed academically. It had been about discovering that we were both enough, exactly as we were. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app, where I'd been keeping a journal of our experiences. Tonight's entry was simple. Year 2 begins tomorrow. Emma starts 4th grade with confidence, curiosity, and joy. She knows who she is and what she's capable of. She's learned that being gifted isn't about being perfect, it's about being authentically yourself while continuing to grow. I've learned that being a good parent isn't about having all the resources or qualifications. It's about seeing your child clearly, believing in their potential, and creating an environment where they can flourish. Sarah's laughter in the courthouse feels like it happened to different people. We're not those people anymore, the doubting father and the anxious daughter. We're a team now, partners in this adventure of learning and growing and becoming who we're meant to be. Emma's college fund has $20 in it. By the time she needs it, it'll have enough to give her choices. But more importantly, she'll have the confidence to make good choices. Whatever they might be, the future feels bright. I set the phone aside and fell asleep to the sound of Emma's peaceful breathing from the next room, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, and that we were ready to meet them together. We'd built something that couldn't be shaken by other people's doubts or expectations. We'd built a foundation of love, respect, and authentic success that would serve Emma for the rest of her life. That was worth more than any custody, victory, or academic achievement. That was the real triumph too, people learning to believe in themselves and each other, creating a life filled with purpose, joy, and endless possibility.